And now it's time for our Shot of Emuna, of faith, with Rabbi Lazer Brody. You can go to his award-winning blog at www.lazerbrody.net, the blog called Laser Beams. Today's talk, what you see isn't what you get. Welcome to the show, Rabbi Lazer Brody.
Hi, Tamar. It certainly is not what you get, whether in Israel, whether in the United States. Let's start with the United States. Okay, we have the Bush administration, which the Republicans. We know forever the Republican Party flag has forever, since time immemorial, been financial market freedom. But yet here we see, with the crisis that's happening in the United States, the financial crisis, to bail out the giant AIG, the Republican-led administration pumped $85 billion of taxpayer-paid dollars to keep that firm from going under, and that's not all. All kinds of names. How's your American vocabulary, Tamar? Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch. Well, overnight, these big names on Wall Street, poof, thin air. They're no longer there. Even you take what's left, people like big names like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. They're the only giants left standing, but they're not standing so firmly. They're wobbling at the knees, and they're fighting for their lives too. And one thing I really pity, the poor brokers in America that they don't have Emuna and personal prayer to fall back on. Recently on one of the European newspapers, they went to a bar off Wall Street, and the stockbrokers were drowning their woes in their wine at the end of the close of the market. And one broker commented very prophetically, he said, nothing will be like it was before. The world as we know is going down. I don't know down or up, but what the first part he said is accurate. Nothing's going to be like it was before. Hashem is making big changes. And you see right now there's legislation in the United States. We talked about Republican free market administration, and now the U.S. triggered financial crisis, make it a global crisis, the European and the Chinese stock market, the Japanese stock market, the Russian stock market is having major problems. Okay, and now they are talking about infusing $700 billion. Okay, and into saving Wall Street, saving American firms. Now, what you have, this is a mind-boggling amount of money, and that this is making America just like Big Brother. In other words, they're more than a socialist regime. It's like a communist regime doing something like that. Not the Democrats, not a socialist thing, but here the Republican, Bush-led United States is talking about pumping in all this money, and it is tantamount to nationalizing Wall Street. In other words, it's like to be the Bursa in Russia, the communist stock market before Perestroika, when it was still the USSR, and that's what it turned out. It's Big Brother. I'll tell you a little story, and we're going to tie this in, a little anecdote. Up till now, there was a family in Washington, D.C. that's been in contact with me, and I told that family, I gave them for already 2 years ago, and I said, phase things out. Be in contact with Nefesh B'Nefesh. Start thinking about Aliyah. Phase out your properties and move everything over to Israel. All your assets, with the kids and even the family pet. Come on over, because everything's going down there, which it has been done the last 2 years with the mortgage crisis, and everything is going up here. In other words, if you invested in a Jerusalem apartment or in a Beit Shemesh, a Ramat Beit Shemesh apartment, and 2 years ago, then you've doubled your money. Fantastic. Anyway, they haven't listened. They give all kinds of reasons not, and this and that. I got an email from them right before Shabbat, and they say, Rabbi, we've scrapped our Aliyah plans. Wall Street is back up. Okay, Wall Street went crazy right before Shabbat with a power surge skyward because of this rumor that the government was going to pump in $700 billion on Wall Street. Okay, now it's really tragic to see how an entire nation, fools themselves. So America's financial crisis is far from over. The USA, they're printing more money to cover its domestic debts. They can't do that to cover foreign debt. Now, look at the American debt. It is an alarming $10 trillion. Now, the current legislation that wants to pump in $0.7 trillion, which is $700 billion, okay, The current legislation wants to increase the statutory limit in the American public debt to $11.3 trillion. Now, Tamar, something is going to happen. Something's got to give. So what's happening in the meanwhile? In the meanwhile, companies are going down. You take leading American companies, high-tech, Hewlett-Packard, laid off 26,000 high-tech personnel. You're not talking about people on the street. You're talking about high-tech personnel, computer engineers, programmers, top people. They're talking about 40,000 financial sector, private sector jobs in danger in New York alone, and all over the place. Okay, so we see here, America elects itself and a Republican administration, and they end up getting something that's more socialist than the Democrats, something more liberal and almost communist. Okay, now this is not, really, the Bush administration is not at fault. It's Hashem doing this. Hashem, they're pulling the strings. What you see is not what you get. Here, it's very mindful of when Israel elected the Sharon administration. Okay, it was Sharon administration, a platform of the sanctity and the wholeness of the land of Israel, and the Sharon administration ended up giving it back Gush Katif. Okay, so we have to look. It's not what the people do. It's not what they're puppets. It's what Hashem does. So what you see is not what you get. Now, what do we see about all this thing? Hashem is talking to us loud and clear. Now, one of the complaints in history that people play, why didn't we know about the Holocaust, and why weren't we warned about the Holocaust, and we didn't know what was going on, and this and that. Okay, Tamar, I'm going to propose something that's not going to be popular at all. All right, but what you have now in America is a template for another Holocaust. Now, people are going to be crying. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. People want to worry about the World Series and what's for dinner and what's on TV tonight. They certainly want to hear. But listen, we have to ask ourselves, why is Hashem giving America so much trouble? I mean, they barely had a chance to recover from Gustav and Ike, and we talked about a few weeks ago, and now Wall Street. So, what's next? What's Hashem doing?